AJ 240, Oleksandr Usyk 221 at the weigh-in here yesterday. For AJ, that's a very similar weight to what he was in the Ruiz rematch and also last time out against Pulev. I think he was slightly lighter in the Ruiz rematch and slightly heavier against Pulev. As far as Usyk, this is a career heaviest for him, but it's not as heavy as some of the rumors that were circulating were suggesting he might be, because they were talking about 230 pounds. 221, for me, is the upper limit of what Usyk should be weighing. No more than that, at least from my perspective. So I think the weights are both good. Now, with AJ, I don't think that he's coming at this weight for any specific reason with regards to Usyk. I don't think so. I think that this weight is what he's decided it needs to be following the Andy Ruiz first fight, because he came in 237, I think it was, for the rematch, which is much lighter than he's been in years. And then for the Pulev fight, a similar weight. So it's just the weight he feels at his optimum, it would seem right now. Yeah? So it's not a specific weight for Usyk. As far as Usyk goes, I have to imagine that there is something specific about this Anthony Joshua fight that he feels like he needs some extra strength, some extra muscle. And again, I'm glad he's not 230, but what is he hoping to do in this fight? Is he going to move around? Is he actually going to try and put some pressure on AJ at some point? Because Usyk is normally a very cagey guy in the early rounds. He'll have a look at you, he'll assess you, he'll try and figure out the angles, then he'll go to work usually from the mid rounds on. And with Anthony Joshua, he's usually very sharp early on. He's not necessarily a fast starter all the time, AJ, but he's usually sharp. He'll take a round or two, then he'll get to work usually quite early. If you remember that even the first Andy Ruiz fight, he was hitting Ruiz with big power shots from as early as the second round. And, well, we know what happened in the third round. He dropped Andy Ruiz. Ruiz got off the canvas, and the rest is history. So I'm expecting a pretty cagey fight here, particularly with the fact you got a southpaw. So they're both going to be jostling for position with their lead hands. AJ is going to be looking to get off a straight right hand down the pipe, the kind of right hand that he hit Charles Martin with. Obviously, Usyk is no Charles Martin. He's much better than that. But nonetheless, AJ will be looking to utilize that same weapon down the middle, the straight right hand. There might not be that many jabs landed from either guy. AJ coming in this light, he'll be able to move around very well on his feet, be light on his feet himself. And Usyk will be cognizant of that right hand. So I'm expecting a cagey one. And if there is some big bombs landing, I'm expecting them to be from the mid rounds onwards, when either or guy could slow down. As G-Man said in the video we did together about this fight, I think he did mention this. He certainly has mentioned it to me somewhere, either on in one of my Discord servers or in that video. And he talked about AJ going to Usyk's body. Yeah, I'm pretty sure it was the video that I did with him that I uploaded to YouTube. He talked about AJ going to Usyk's body the way that he went to Povetkin's body. And I think that that could be crucial for AJ, because when you got a smaller guy like this who's going to move about, you want to take those legs away. You want to stop that movement. So then you can lower the boom and really start to put some hands on the guy. Yeah. So yeah, definitely try and land some right hands to the body. It's always a bit dangerous, particularly against the southpaw, because you can get countered by the left hand. Usyk hasn't shown any great power at heavyweight. Even at cruiserweight, he wasn't a massive puncher. But at the end of the day, AJ probably doesn't have the greatest chin. So you don't want to take chances, even with a guy like this. And just ask Tyson Fury about cruiserweights, who apparently don't have much power. When he fought Steve Cunningham, he found himself flat on his back. Right? He got complacent against the guy who wasn't noted as a puncher even at cruiserweight, and he dropped him more heavily than, well, anybody else at the time. Since then, obviously, he was dropped by Deontay Wilder. In fact, some people might argue that the Steve Cunningham knockdown was still heavier than the one he suffered against Deontay Wilder. But anyway, that's another story. So, yeah, going to be an interesting fight here. I'm leaning towards Anthony Joshua on points. I think that he's going to have the rub of the green by way of judges and officiating, because this is in the UK, at Tottenham Stadium, all of AJ's fans, and there's so much riding on AJ. There's a lot of economic uncertainty right now. The amount of people that AJ is feeding is not to be underestimated. Yeah, the amount of people in his team and around him, and even not just directly, indirectly, that he's paying the bills for, right? He calls himself the landlord, thinks he's gigs. The guy who's, the amount of people who are eating off AJ is not to be underestimated. So I think he's going to have the rub of the green, or I suspect he will, with regards to officiating. And in a cagey fight, where I think we're going to see a lot of rounds that are open to interpretation, I think AJ is going to get the benefit of the doubt. And Usyk's really going to have to go above and beyond to win a decision here. And I just don't think, unless he manages to catch AJ with something significant, I don't think he's the kind of fighter that's really going to get that aggressive, right? If he manages to catch AJ with, like, let's say, a left-hand counter and AJ wobbles, and maybe it's late in the fight and, there isn't many rounds to go, then Usyk might feel like, okay, here's my opportunity, let me go for it. But if it's KG round after round, nobody's really getting hurt, something similar to the Joseph Parker fight, I mean, hopefully there's more action than that, because that was a horrible fight. That was one of the few AJ fights that wasn't entertaining, right? That Joseph Parker fight. But if it's something similar to that, is Usyk really going to step on the gas and start taking chances, or is he going to take his chances with the judges? I suspect the latter. He'll take his chances with the judges and, see what they say, because at least then he's got plausible deniability. If it goes the distance and it's a nip and tuck fight, they give it to AJ, Usyk can say, well, come on, man, the judges, they didn't want to see it my way. Just look how widely they scored it and so on. Yeah, he's got plausible deniability. If he goes for it and gets knocked out, there's no plausible deniability. You just got knocked out. You can't blame it on any judges. You can't blame it on any referee. So, well, depending on how a knockout happens, right? So I'm favoring AJ on points. I think it's going to be a cagey affair. There's been a few people, Chris Andre, I'm not sure if G-Man said the same, but certainly Chris Andre thinks it's going to be controversial. I can see that. Yeah, I can see that. Particularly because I'm expecting a cagey fight. If it's a fight where I'm expecting one guy to totally dominate the other guy, then I'm not expecting in a situation like that to turn out to be controversial, but that's not what I'm envisioning here. I'm envisioning a fight where it's nip and tuck, where people are going to have different kind of scorecards, where some people are going to say, you know what, AJ won. And look, this is the AJ show. So most of his fans are going to be saying, oh, AJ won it if it's a nip and tuck fight. But perhaps a lot of people across the pond in America and a lot of neutral people in Ukraine, Eastern Europe, they're going to be saying, nah, Usyk won it. I think it's going to be that sort of fight. I suspect it could be at least. Yeah. If AJ wins this fight decisively, he deserves massive credit because Usyk is no slouch. This is a former undisputed cruiserweight champion. And this is, somebody who would be great to have on anyone's resume in the win column. So full props to AJ if he wins this one decisively. Like, let's say he knocks Usyk out or completely beats him up throughout the course of 12 rounds and there's absolutely no doubt and there's nothing open to interpretation, and wins clearly and deservedly on the scorecards. And of course for Usyk, if he manages to come in here and pull off the upset, that's an even greater feat for him because he didn't look great against Chaz Witherspoon or Derek Chisora. So if he manages just after 2 fights to go in there against AJ and pull off this upset in AJ's hometown at Tottenham Stadium, right? That would be massive. Now, Oleksandr Usyk moving up to heavyweight. The situation that we're in right now is not ideal. And I always wondered whether he would maybe take his time a little bit more, have some more fights before challenging. But he is 34 years of age at this point. So he doesn't have that much time left in his prime, if he is still in his prime, to actually get a title shot. Or maybe that's what he was thinking, because when David Haye fought for a world title against Klitschko, how old was he? I swear he must have been around Usyk's age or younger, right? And he'd been fighting at heavyweight. Well, he fought Thomas Bonin the first time. He moved up to heavyweight. Then he fought Monty Barrett. Then he fought, was it Nikolai Valov straight after that? And then he fought John Ruiz. And then finally Klitschko. So unless you count Nikolai Valov as an elite heavyweight, then he had 4 fights before stepping in there with an elite heavyweight. Yeah, 4 fights at the weight. Oleksandr Usyk's only had 2, and he's stepping in there with an elite heavyweight already. Now, AJ is not as well established as Klitschko was at the time when David Haye fought Klitschko. Okay, when I say well established, he hadn't had as many fights, and he didn't have the kind of aura around him that Klitschko had at the time. How can I describe it? There was a sense of inevitability with Klitschko winning at that time in his career. There was this formulaic thing where people would talk about what they were going to do before the fight. They get in the ring, and then it was a typical Klitschko fight. Jab, jab, grab, jab, jab, grab. The smaller guy can't do anything, and then Klitschko just basically bludgeons the guy to a very methodical victory. It was the same thing over and over again, right? And because it happened so many times, people expected that. You just knew this was going to be the same pattern over and over again. With AJ, there's an unpredictability about his career at the moment because he's only a couple fights removed from a knockout loss. And in the fight since the Andy Ruiz rematch and the Kubrat Pulev fight, he's shown vulnerability. So this is not quite like the Klitschko that fought David Haye. Yeah, this is a guy who does seem a bit more vulnerable. Okay, the perception that people have of him is that he's a bit more vulnerable and maybe hasn't quite got the confidence, at least not in his past 2 fights. Maybe he'll show more confidence this time around because he's in there with somebody who isn't noted as a natural heavyweight or a big puncher, right? Kubrat Pulev, not really a big puncher, but certainly a natural heavyweight. Andy Ruiz was, of course, the guy that knocked him out previous to that. So, yeah, I think it's a bit different to David Haye when he fought Klitschko, okay? With AJ not quite being as established as Klitschko. And for Usyk, well, he's a more technically proficient fighter than David Haye. When David Haye fought Klitschko, all he had was that right hand. That's all he was banking on. Usyk has got more tools in his locker than that. He's not just a straight left hand. Yeah? He's a lot more tricky. If you go and watch Usyk when he fights big guys, like the Joe Joyce fight in the WSB, for example, you'll see that he has many different ways of tackling a big guy. In that Joyce fight, in the early rounds, he was moving around. He was walking Joyce onto punches. Later on in the fight, as the fight progressed, Usyk was actually walking Joyce down. Once he'd figured out certain angles, once he'd figured out what he could do and what he couldn't do, you see? So he does different things. David Haye, against big guys, he only ever did one thing, and that was move around the ring, circling and looking for a big right hand. So I'm expecting this fight to be a lot more competitive than, let's say, Vladimir Klitschko versus David Haye. More competitive, more cagey, a chess match. Like I say, hopefully it's not going to be as boring as the Joseph Parker fight, and that there will be a bit more drama. Maybe AJ will feel like he needs to give the fans something, given the fact that it's his first fight in front of a big crowd again in several years in the UK, right? He had the fight out in Saudi Arabia in front of a big crowd. The Pulev fight, I think there was only 1,000 people. So this is the first fight in front of a big crowd in a long time. And perhaps that could influence his performance. Not to the extent that he's going to be reckless, but maybe to the extent that if it turns out to be a soporific fight like it was against Parker, he may go the extra mile. He may try that bit harder to close the show rather than have the fans sit through 12 boring rounds and be very anticlimactic. So let me know what you guys think in the comments below. And to be completely clear, so there's no ambiguity at all, my prediction is Anthony Joshua to win this fight on a 12-round decision. I just feel like, of course, AJ could win it legitimately. I'm not saying that it has to be controversial, not at all. Yeah? But the fact that this is in AJ's backyard and it's the AJ show, and when I look at the styles of both guys, I just think that Usyk would have to do an awful lot to be able to convince the judges. If this fight was in the Ukraine and AJ wasn't the superstar that he is, I might actually be inclined to pick Usyk to win on points. It's that kind of fight where I'm expecting a lot of nip and tuck rounds and interpretation, and there's only one more punch landed by one guy than the other guy in a round, good clean punch, and you're like, oh, who to give that one to? I'm expecting one of those kind of fights, okay? And in a situation like that, it's usually best to pick the home fighter, especially when the home fighter is bigger, stronger, younger. He maybe doesn't have as fast a feet as Usyk, although AJ's feet are not slow at all. But in terms of hand speed, does AJ have faster hands than Usyk? I guess we'll see on the night. When AJ lets his combinations go and he throws that fast 1-2, he's got quick hands. Usyk is pretty quick-handed, but it's nothing spectacular. David Haye to me was much more faster-handed than Oleksandr Usyk. And there's been other cruiserweights as well. I'd say Holyfield had faster hands than Usyk. So Usyk has quick hands, but it's nothing shocking. It's nothing surprising. And he's got the movement. He's got the skill set and what have you. I'm expecting him to try utilize everything. But if AJ makes himself tall, and if AJ uses that reach well, he can make it difficult for Usyk to get close to him and get in and get his own shots off. So yeah, I feel like Usyk's going to have to go some here to get the W. Maybe score a knockdown, hurt AJ, do something which is significant to stamp his authority on the fight. I struggle to see his hand being raised after a cagey 12-round chess match, And as far as KOs, because I haven't really discussed that much here, could either guy win by KO? Well, AJ certainly has the power to KO Usyk. Usyk hasn't shown any vulnerability by way of punch resistance. He's taken some big shots. Although, I think he rides punches quite well. And his defense, people say he gets hit. Yeah, he does get hit. But he's not Antonio Margarito in terms of getting hit. I would say AJ gets hit more than Usyk does. So, doesn't mean AJ will get hit more than Usyk in this fight. But I'm talking about in other fights, right? So if there was a knockout, I suspect it would be AJ knocking Usyk out. Because I think he's the man with a bigger power. I think he can do the more damage. Would I completely dismiss the possibility of Usyk knocking AJ out? No. It's heavyweight boxing. AJ is vulnerable. So that's a possibility too. But if there's a knockout, I'm expecting it to come from AJ and it to be Usyk on the receiving end of it. Come and join me on Patreon and access my weekly no-holds-barred, censorship-free podcast where we lift the lid on a wide range of controversial topics. It's not mainstream friendly, it's not politically correct, but that's the whole point. We dare to stand as a beacon of reason against an army of insanity. Just head on over to my Patreon page and select the tier called Hatman Hot Topics. You'll gain access to a minimum of 2 hours of exclusive content every single week, including podcasts, videos, interviews, live stream Q&A sessions, as well as my popular Confessions of a Nightclub Bouncer series. Not to mention a vast back catalog of hundreds of hours of previous episodes. You can listen via the Patreon app with the option to download in high quality MP3. We've also got a Discord server where you can come and chat and hang out with myself and other members. There's no contract, no commitment, and you can cancel at any time. So come and join our community of free and critical thinkers by signing up with me here on Patreon today.